is the Real Health Podcast brought to you by Riordan Clinic. Our mission is to bring you the latest information and top experts in functional and integrative medicine to help you make informed decisions on your path to real health. Welcome back to the Real Health Podcast and part 2 of our special series, An Integrative Approach to Thriving Through Cancer, featuring our own Dr. Kirsten West and Jenn Nolan of Remission Nutrition. If you haven't been able to listen to part 1 yet, we highly encourage you to go back and start there. In today's episode, we continue exploring your submitted questions, touching on everything from advanced lab testing to emotional resilience, supplements, and personalized strategies for healing. Let's jump back in, shall we?
Okay, well, this is one that I think we both get quite a bit. So first of all, this person said, thank you for providing this forum. I had a neighbor that swears that she passed multiple tumors by going on a freshly juiced 100% carrot juice diet. Is there nutrition science data about this?
I mean, yes. And I'm wondering how orange her
that
neighbor was.
Yeah.
Definitely. Juice equals sugar. It's kind of simple to me. I think about when people tell me that they're juicing, I try to explain that is sort of like it's like taking a shot of sugar through the veins. Boom, your blood sugar is going to go up quite rapidly. You have no fiber in the juice to slow down your blood sugar load. And we want to remember that, blood sugar or metabolic health is at the core of our health and a cancer journey. So that's a big one for us. We talk about juicing all the time. People do talk about, well, if I have these nutrients that come just from the juice, so I've squeezed out, I take this raw food and I squeeze out the fiber, then those nutrients will go right in to my body. And maybe some of that is a little bit true, but where I question it is, wait a minute, the fiber is there to help the digestion slow down. So we have the opportunity to draw out the nutrients, right? And what about this? The fact that we need fat in our diet, we need fat with the food to absorb these nutrients. So vitamins A, D, E, and K are fat soluble, not to mention all the other micronutrients that we get, these phytonutrients and all the things. We need fat to absorb. And so we can't just have this sugar from the juice, right? And so, what I would say is, what if we talked about these solutions? And I love your solution around green drinks. Like if somebody's really insistent, look, I really want to take in juice. Okay, then we're going straight up greens.
Yeah.
Okay. And we don't need a big bottle in a plastic bottle, but we don't need a big bottle of juice. What about little shots?
Yeah.
And what about adding it with some olive oil? That will slow down the sugar load to the body. It will help the body absorb those nutrients, and we won't get a big, massive sugar spike. Exercise. Exercise before or exercise after. Keep your apples out of it. I'm sorry. Juice.
Even green apples do not count.
No, they're very carby or very sugary. So that is really, really important. I love, like we talked about with the olive oil, we can also just blend it.
Yeah.
So just dump all your stuff into a good blender. Yeah. And then you get the fiber. So I do that a lot. I still don't just have that though. I would still put some fat in it and make it almost more of a meal, or maybe with a meal.
Right.
So I have a zingy green drink. I think I've shared in maybe a newsletter, but we can put that in the show too, just so people can find that. But great nutrition, very high sugar.
Yeah.
If it's not done right.
Totally.
Okay.
Totally.
Awesome.
And just an add-on to the question that was earlier about the circulating tumor cell DNA, I just realized that, some people might say, well, why not get a scan? If the tumor markers are going up, why not just get a scan? And the problem is that when disease may start to recur, or you're in the initial cancering process, a lot of times that disease is not going to be large enough to see on imaging. So it's much better to utilize other ways to determine if a scan is really actually needed or not. So, yeah. Okay. This was one we both liked.
Yeah.
So someone asked, 5 best steps for cancer prevention. What would you say some of the top ones are?
Well, I think this is really paying attention to your stress, your kind of mental, emotional well-being, your support system, your community, being social and not, it's okay to have some time. I always say it's okay to like fall apart and lie down on the bed or the couch or whatever, and then having to lift ourselves up and get with people. And that's huge. Avoiding processed foods, decreasing sugar and carbohydrates. Again, everybody's different and how much they can handle in the carbohydrate place. But I think no matter what, in order to achieve metabolic health, we got to bring our carbs down.
Oh yeah.
So that's important. And then if we can do some fasting every day, that's beautiful. I can't tell you how many clients eat at night.
Yeah.
And simply taking 3 hours, dinner to bedtime without food, chamomile tea, water in the evenings without food, it's hugely beneficial. We see it all the time in labs. Like that's something that you can just see. So 13 to 16 hours without food is a good target. I usually start people at 13 to 14 hours. I'm like, let's just do this. Get your body used to it, because this isn't about torturing people. It's about finding, that balance and being really kind of gentle with your body, because you're already going through a lot. So be gentle, but start making these changes that are going to last.
Yeah. And I think even someone could take, if they're very used to eating at night, like start with 2 nights where you're like, okay, I'm going to start 2 nights doing this, because the more that you realize that you're going to be okay not eating for that 3 hours between dinner and bedtime, then you start to be like, okay, well, maybe I can do it a couple more days a week. And the thing, we used to always say 13 hours. There was a study that came out, I think 2 years ago, that actually says 16 hours really is the best amount of time. But I think if all of us, 13 hours is doable. So if we can all start with 13 hours, we're better off.
Totally. So. And, back to that evening thing, if you're eating it in the evenings, like a lot of people eat popcorn or, maybe fruit, things like that, go with, those are very high carbs. So that's going to just be brutal, or can be, on your sleep and your, blood sugar regulation and all the things. So if you are going to have something, have a hard-boiled egg, or some really high quality nut butter, something with fat and protein. Well, that'll be a lot.
And that becomes an issue, because I have patients who are like, well, I have to take pills at night.
Exactly.
So, and I have to eat something. And then that's when I'm like, well, what about a tablespoon of macadamia nut butter with your pills? So there's ways we can work around it. So yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Some of my favorite ones, we had gone through these last night, but exercise is one of my very, very favorites. My patients know this. I always tell them that if I had a choice between pristine diet, supplements, or exercise would be the number one thing. And the studies are now confirmed. I mean, the studies they've always confirmed it, but they just continue to confirm it. And the 150 minutes a week really is ideal, but we have to remember that's at least. So, and really, guys, that comes down to 30 minutes, 5 days a week. Very doable. We also don't want to overdo it, because again, we're in this, mindset, I think, in American mentality of, well, more is better, more is better. We don't need to be overdoing it either, because too much exercise can cause oxidative stress, especially if someone's not eating well, especially if someone doesn't have enough weight on to begin with. So you really do need to fine tune it for the individual. I do think that getting some form of resistance training in there is imperative for our muscles and our bones, especially as we get older. Walking is beautiful, but we do need to get something that's giving that stimulation to our muscles to grow and stay strong. And so, gosh, resistance training can come in so many flavors. Yoga, Pilates, resistance bands. If you like doing weight training, do some weight training with dumbbells. Anything that you love. That's the key. You got to find something that you love, because if you don't, you're not going to stick with it. And I had a friend who always said, you always hear people go, gosh, I really wish I would have gone to the gym. But you never hear someone go, man, I really wish I hadn't gone to the gym. Of course, unless something happens at the gym, but yeah. So very important. And again, once you get in the habit of doing it, it becomes something that you want to become a healthy addicted to that. And then the one that I think about this a lot, and I think about this the more and more that we're in our society and the more that we're behind screens. But I think something that is so important that so many fail to do or don't have the opportunity to do, and maybe opportunity is the key, is to commune with nature. I mean, we are very much in suburban areas, cities, we are in offices, we're behind screens, and there really is something about being in nature, being outside. A great example of this is just being around trees. Trees themselves put off a component called phytonicides, and those actually improve our immune function, support mood, and decrease stress. And so this is why in Japan, they actually prescribe forest bathing, which is actually going out and being in the trees, because it is therapeutic. It is therapeutic. So
hug trees.
Hug trees. There's something to it. So, so to sum it up, exercise, forage in the forest with your tribe, the people that fill your heart the most. Mm-hmm. And then, eat whole foods and just really get back to our roots. I think that really, when you come down to all of this, it's about coming back to our roots and the foundation.
I couldn't agree.
So
we do have Sarah on our team that she specializes in oncology nutrition, but she also is certified in exercise training for folks with cancer, which is really cool.
Cool.
We, it can be done safely. It's still remote, but she can look at what do you have at your house? What weights do you have? What bands do you have? What equipment? Wonderful. And then she can really help people really meet them where they are and what their needs are. Because that can be scary exercise when somebody's really not feeling it.
Yeah.
It's also the best thing.
It's also the best thing. And that's the thing is I tell people, they're like, well, I'm too tired. And I'm like, but if you can get out and start moving, you're actually going to feel better. It's a big paradox.
It is.
But it does help.
You want to do.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. And then it made me think of one other thing. When I was at the Mistletoe conference about a month ago, one of the German doctors was speaking about how in the hospitals in Germany, people who have windows in their hospital rooms actually survive significantly longer. So that tells you something right there. So
it's got to be true.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah.
That's neat. So another question is there a link between fungus and cancer? What foods should we avoid? Like coffee, fruits? ?
Yeah, I do think that there is a link between fungus and cancer. If any of you had watched the podcast Dr. Ron and I did a couple months ago regarding the fungal link in cancer, you all will know that. Maybe go back and listen to it. But the thought is this thought of a co-infection. And bottom line is if our terrain is not set up to be healthy and to be in balance, we create a situation where if we are exposed to fungus or mycotoxins or other pathogens, they have the ability to kind of take root because they're like, well, this is a good terrain because, there's a lot of inflammation, there's blood sugar issues, things that we normally should be able to fight off, we can't. And so there's this concept, and a man by the name of Mark Lintern also, he did a podcast with Dr. Ron, amazing, amazing man. I think he's really onto something. But his theory is that fungus will cause an infection, and the cell originally tries to go into like almost the Warburg effect. This is what cells do when they're trying to evade pathogen. But if the cell isn't strong enough to get past the pathogen, it stays in this negative feedback loop of being in glycolysis. And we know that that's what cancer cells do. They stay in this Warburg glycolytic pathway. And so the fungus actually ends up using that to its advantage. And it becomes this constant co-infection that just stays. And so there's a thought that the fungus could actually be causing greater cell growth and eventually form a tumor. There's so much more to it. There's a quote that I put here. This is from Mark Lintern that I thought really drove it home, but he says, sustained intracellular fungal infection may be the origin of cancer generated through the mechanism of cell suppression and stimulated into being a myriad of carcinogens that prime the cellular terrain for fungal invasion. So that says it right there. So when we think about that, we do a lot of mycotoxin or mold testing at the clinic. And I do see levels. Elevated in a lot of my cancer patients. And at that point, we do talk about, there's lots of things we talk about, but we do talk about dietary intake, and there are things we talk about being mindful of. Mm-hmm. We definitely want to be careful of cheese and sour milk products, dried fruit, grains, packaged and smoked meats, and then the nuts that we really want to be careful of are cashews, peanuts, and Brazil nuts.
Yeah.
So the other thing that's so interesting about this is that when we do go lower carb, as we tend to promote for someone dealing with cancer, we tend to get away from a lot of the grains and the foods that can be mold laden. And so you kind of wonder about, well, when we're doing ketogenic or when we're doing low carb, are we also treating mold by doing that? So it's just an interesting thing to think about, in addition to the fact that a lot of the repurposed drugs that we use for cancer also happen to be anti-mold, antifungal. So,
and what about, we talked a little bit about mushrooms last night. What are your thoughts?
Mushrooms are probably one of my favorite supplements. And so the supplemental form of mushrooms are okay. If someone comes up with high mycotoxins or mold levels, the supplemental forms of mushrooms are okay. The edible forms of fungi, potentially not. But I do wonder if the reason we just need to be mindful of them is not because they will really stimulate mold growth so much as they will just come back high in the mycotoxin panels. Gotcha. That's kind of a gray area. There might be people, there's probably people out there who know that. I'm still kind of like trying to figure that out. And I think part of it is because I have such a love for mushrooms that maybe I don't want to know that they could promote further growth of mold. So, yeah.
Gotcha. I also think that, when people are buying berries or they're buying the little microgreens or sprouts.
Yes.
That always makes me nervous when you get them home and you're like, oh no.
Yeah. And it's always that one berry in there
that just wrecks the
that
whole
you're
thing.
like, oh, great.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And, storage of our foods, of our nuts and seeds in glass containers, airtight, in
cold.
the fridge. Yes. Quality coffee. That's a biggie. Mold.
You can even buy like mold tested coffee at this point. Yeah.
And one of the things too, when we're talking about, like you brought up the lower carb, diet or ketogenic, but also, we see people really leaning into a lot of nuts and seeds.
Yeah.
And so we're always like, maybe not so much.
Back.
You don't have to just rely on that. Let's get really good veg in, really great protein, and really great fats. And then you don't have to be just constantly munching on nuts and seeds.
Yeah.
So that would lower the exposure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So those are some, and alcohol, of course, and fermented foods, stay away from. So, yeah. All right. Gosh, there's a whole other world on the mold piece that we could go into. So
I'm glad that there's a podcast that.
Yeah. There's 2 podcasts, The Lintern and then Dr. Ron and I. So, and there's so many others out there. So, how healthy are smoothies? How healthy are smoothies? Do they really have nutrients in them? How much sugar does fruit really have in it? Why is it okay to eat fruit, but not sugar?
I love this question. Typically when I think about a smoothie, I think high sugar. And typically when you go to a smoothie shop,
high
sugar, right? And so, a lot of clients like to have what I would call a shake, and we can utilize a shake, especially for folks that we want to really, increase their calories so we can get a lot of fat into those shakes. So it really depends on what you put in it that makes it maybe more healthy or not so healthy. So, using fruit like berries, these are going to be lower sugar fruits. Some berries, not like a cup or 2 of
and cherries don't count.
Sad. No, I just wore a continuous glucose monitor and I saw what a couple of cherries did to my blood sugar. It's crazy. And we're all different, right? So everybody can take in different things, but generally, like instead of a banana, I will use a half of an avocado, put that in, great fiber, great fat, right? And creamy. So you get that creamy texture. Then I add some frozen berries, depending on what I've got. I use organic berries and they're lovely, but I, again, don't use too many. And then I'm not a gal who likes to put a lot of green things into my smoothie because it really makes it ugly. And I'm like, I don't
brown.
Really want that. Yeah, it's very brown. And so I don't do that. Not to mention, some people do have trouble with having too many of those green veg, especially spinach, because of those high oxalates, which, that's a whole other question on its own. So fruit does have a lot of sugar. Fruit juice has a lot more. Again, it's more glycemic. It's going to raise the blood sugar more.
Mm-hmm.
So watching which fruits you choose varies over, say, bananas or apple juice, cherries, things like that. So it is okay to eat fruit. And why? Because there's all these amazing phytonutrients in fruit. Color, eat the rainbow, right? The purples, the reds, all these anti-cancer nutrients, food as medicine. And it also has sugar. So we have to remember to not go overboard and not to have it by itself. So that's where sort of one of these shakes is kind of perfect. We look at the macronutrients, right? Is there fat in my shake? Is there carbohydrate? Maybe not too much. And is there protein? And protein is a struggle because protein powders, another conversation, can be really tough on the digestion. There's ingredients in them that are not that spectacular.
Right.
So for me, I will make my little shake if I'm going to do that, or make it into a smoothie bowl. So I eat it with a spoon, and then I might have a couple of hard-boiled eggs on the side for my protein.
Perfect. Yeah.
So chewing a smoothie is really important, or shake. For blood sugar. So not just gulping it down.
Exactly. Perfect.
Yes.
Awesome.
All right. This is kind of our finale. If I am trying to prevent cancer, how important is it to quit eating dairy and gluten? What's the best alternative in milks, almond, oat, pea milk?
So again, it's a little bit of a gray area as far as the dairy piece is concerned. But yes, I do think that it is important to quit eating dairy and gluten. When we think about, now there's a caveat to the dairy piece, but let's just dial back here for a second. When we think about what dairy is from milk. And what is milk supposed to do? Milk is created to grow something larger. And if we are at risk for cancer, if we're worried about cancer, if we already have cancer or have had a history of cancer, we really don't want that message of we need to grow. And so this is where absolutely no milk. No drinking milk. I don't care if it's sheep's milk, goat's milk, cow's milk. There was actually a study that came out that showed that 1 glass of milk a day significantly increased risk of breast cancer, specifically hormonal positive breast cancer. So there's the piece about milk. Now, there are some types of dairy, not milk, some types of dairy that may be okay. And it's because of the content. Some of these are heavy whipping cream. Again, you want to make sure you're getting it from grass-finished cows, not just get grass-fed cows, but grass-finished. And grass-finished means that those cows have been pasture-raised their entire life. So you want to get heavy whipping cream from that population of cows. Cottage cheese is okay as well. And then sheep and goat's milk is actually pretty good. And I find it personally easier to digest. It also has higher levels of certain fatty acids, and it's got some more nutrients. So
sheep and goat cheese.
Sheep and goat cheese. Yep. Sheep and goat cheese. Products. Yep.
Not milk.
Not milk. No milk. And then definitely avoid fake cheese. I mean, a lot of people go, well, gosh, I just really needed cheese. So I found this cheese at the store and it tastes good. But if people looked at the packages on these things, it's all processed. So here we go, getting back to the processed food aspect and the seed oils and the seed oils. So really try to avoid those. Now, yes, some of these nut milks may be okay. We talked about this. But I'd probably steer towards coconut milk, almond milk in moderation, macadamia nut milk, hemp milk, walnut. They are now making walnut milk and hazelnut milk, but a good milk, you're going to know it at the store. If you look at the carton, it says just simply the nuts and the water, nothing else added. But this is also the fact that why would you actually need this if you could just make your own nut milk at home? I mean, I know that some of us are limited for time, but if you're using it as a base in a smoothie, you could just add your nuts and water right in that smoothie and get your nut milk in there.
That's what I do. I don't buy it anymore, and it saves money, and it also saves the environment. You're not buying these cartons, all the things. So I guess it depends on what you need the milk for.
Right.
But I don't really buy it anymore. I used to quite a lot. And that works. There's this really great thing that I kind of fantasize about called the almond cow. Have you seen it? It's a nut milk maker.
Oh.
And it's great. And then you can use the nuts, the part that comes, it's kind of like, you use the nut pieces for other things. You could make some low heat crackers or something like that. So kind of cool. I don't have.
They have all these toys out there now.
It's great.
Yeah.
So what about, we talked a little bit about that gluten piece. What is your thought on?
Oh yeah, the gluten piece. So yes, I think we absolutely need to abstain from gluten, specifically in our country. The gluten proteins in this country are completely different than how they originally were. Our genetically modified track in this country has really changed what these proteins look like, and they do incite autoimmune patterns and issues. And so it really is important to stay away from gluten. I have people who say, but I don't have issues with it. And it's like, but it's better. And it also gets you away from more of the carbs and more of the processed foods in addition. Omega-6 fats. Yeah. And so sourdough bread, what are your thoughts on sourdough bread?
Well, I mean, it's delicious.
Yeah.
So there is a fermenting process with sourdough breads. And so if somebody's making it in their kitchen, they would argue that, well, I'm making it, there's 3 ingredients, that's lovely compared to what you might get in a store. And it's this old sourdough and all the things. And I'm using really old grains, these amazing grains. And sure, we know that the fermenting process will take down some of the gluten proteins, meaning, yes, but it's still there. And so if somebody were super sensitive, again, like celiac disease, they are not going to be able to have sourdough bread. Autoimmune conditions, we do not want to add any kind of fuel to the fire. And again, you're right, it's still carb.
It's still carb.
Right. And so it does make me feel like being in particular with someone with cancer, that I'm not going to go there.
And I think what we need to be mindful of, and this is something Naisha Winters talked about years ago. I mean, I've learned so much from her. This is one of the things that I will forever have with me along with other things. But, we think about people who are sensitive to gluten or have an actual allergy to gluten. And they're like, especially for my patients, they're like, well, I'm sensitive to gluten, because most of the people who are allergic just really do stay away from it, but they're sensitive. And they're like, but I was so good this month. I just had a little roll with dinner. And it's like, but the way we have to think about it is a swimming pool full of mousetraps that are ready to go off. And you throw a ping pong ball in that swimming pool, and that's the piece of gluten. And it sets off a process which lasts for about 6 months. So, okay, fine. You had one roll in 1 month, but now you're going to be, your body's going to be dealing with that for the next 6 to 7 months. So really, when we talk about abstaining from something, it really does mean abstaining from something.
Well, and they might not know I have a problem with it,
right? Because
maybe late it shows up in their labs, like you said, 6 months it might take. So they might not break out in a crazy rash, but they might still be impacted.
And there's so many things that we're exposed to or that we do that we may not feel, but the labs don't lie. Yeah. And I see that all the time in January and February.
Well, I think it's important really quickly to just say, gluten-free is a great label that everyone's using now. You can go to a restaurant. However, gluten-free can still mean that it's not healthy.
It's still processed.
So tons of like rice pastas and things. So being really careful with that. It's not just gluten. It's lowering your carbohydrates, your omega-6, your processed. Go back to that list of the 5 things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, and also when they do gluten-free, they take out so much of the fiber. So a lot of those gluten-free products actually tend to be higher glycemic index.
Super sugary.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
And glycemic, just to clarify, means sort of how quickly that food is going to turn to sugar in your body.
Yeah. So I think those are the final questions. We had some more, but due to time, we can't dive into those, but hopefully this will be one of more and we can answer the other ones. So it's been a pleasure to be here.
It's been so fun.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yay.
Yeah. Till next time.
Thank you so much for joining us for this 2-part series, An Integrative Approach to Thriving Through Cancer. We are so grateful to Dr. West and Jenn Nolan for sharing their expertise and to everyone who submitted questions. These conversations are made richer by you, the voices of our community. To learn more about integrative oncology at Riordan Clinic or to explore Jenn's work at Remission Nutrition, please check out the episode notes. Until then, we'll see you next time on the Real Health Podcast. Thank you for listening to the Real Health Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. You can also find all of the episodes and show notes over at realhealthpodcast.org. Also, be sure to visit riordanclinic.org, where you will find hundreds of videos and articles to help you create your own version of real health.